This week on Lewis on the Law, I've got yet another great show for you. I've got attorney JoAnna Smith in with me, and we're going to talk about how the law affects the family.
Welcome to Lewis on the Law.
You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I'm your host this week and every week, and I am here to empower you, the listener. That's right, empower you with legal information. And I've got yet another great show, and not great show, an awesome show for you guys today. I have attorney JoAnna Smith in with me, and she's a founding partner of the Georgia Family Law Project. And we're talking baby mama drama here today. We're going to do that big, aren't we?
Yes, we've got family law for you today.
Okay, so what is your company? What is your firm? Georgia Family Law Project?
Sure. So we are a sliding scale family law firm, which means we primarily represent folks who don't qualify for free legal services but can't afford traditional representation. And all of our fees are on a sliding scale based on people's income.
That's incredible. So that way you get to help people who are a little bit more disadvantaged and yet still need your service.
Well, actually, about 80% of Georgians fall in that category. So we're working with families who are working hard and have children, but just maybe can't afford a giant retainer agreement or high fees.
Mm-hmm. Is it the number that high, 80%?
It is. It's a huge number of people who don't have access to representation because they just can't afford it.
Okay. JoAnna, can you give them a little background information for you?
For me?
Yeah, just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I, before law school, was a doula, which is a birth support person.
A doula? Wait
Yes.
a minute. I haven't even heard of this.
Yeah.
What is a birth support person?
Yeah.
Is that like a midwife?
So a midwife would do the medical portion, and a doula does sort of emotional support for the family, and actually goes with the woman through labor and delivery. And
wow, I've never even heard of this.
And as a doula,
it sounds like Middle Eastern or something like that.
It's actually Greek, ancient Greek for woman who serves. So it's basically in old times the community would come together to support women through birth. But doing that, I got to work really closely with families in a pretty chaotic time of their life and provide good information and resources and help them make decisions to help their families succeed. And so when I went to law school, I discovered family law, and
it was just
exactly the same thing.
It was a marriage made in heaven.
Yeah, so now
I get law school.
Yeah, so now I get to work with families, still providing them good information, still helping them make their own decisions, but in a way that can make their family successful moving forward, even if they're in a chaotic time right now.
Okay, so what is family law? What are we talking about here? It sounds like a lot of stuff.
Sure. So when people think of family law, a lot of times they just think of divorce.
Yeah.
But family law includes divorce, both contested and uncontested, which I can explain later, child support, custody, and
all these details you have to have worked out.
Yeah, does. And then in Georgia, we have something called legitimation, which is similar to paternity, but a little bit different for unmarried fathers. And then sometimes it includes things like protective orders and domestic violence as well.
Okay, so what is legitimation? That's one of those fancy legal terms that only the lawyers really understand. What does that mean?
So it's interesting, and it's kind of specific to Georgia, although it happens in a couple different states as well. In Georgia, a father can be a biological father, and he can even be ordered to pay child support. But until he goes to court and legitimates and actually establishes his legal paternity or his legal fatherhood, he doesn't have any legal rights to his child.
Okay, wait a minute. So he can be forced to pay child support, and yet without going to court, and yet until he goes to court, he doesn't have any legal rights to the child?
Yes. So a lot of the cases we do involve.
That is rough.
It's very rough. It's very very specific to Georgia. It's a very strange thing. And so one of the things I like to do is educate unmarried people that, you could be living with a child, be the father, be living with a child for years. And if you break up with your partner and haven't legitimated, you may not have access to that child until you actually go to court and establish your legal rights.
Wow, that sounds crazy to me.
It's crazy.
But so is Georgia one of the only states that has this law in effect?
There's a few, but it's one of the most common cases in Georgia because
Okay.
We don't have administrative legitimation anymore. So.
Now, since you were a doula or doula, I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm unfamiliar with the term.
That's
so
fine.
since you were a doula in your past life, do you focus your practice on women's issues? I guess you don't, because you take legitimation cases, right?
So we don't discriminate. We see men who are the non-custodial parent. We see women who are the non-custodial parent. We do see a lot of cases that involve domestic violence, but it's not specific to men or women. And so it's really just figuring out what each client's particular issue is and the best way to address that. One thing I got from my doula years is that we try to not be confrontational if we can. We try to start out as collaborative as possible and ramp up as we go if we need to, instead of just starting with a sort of no holds barred.
Okay, that's good, because my brief experience in family law was a horrendously confrontational situation, which scarred me forever. I'm just like, what, family law? Absolutely not.
That's not our style, because people have to, even if they're not married anymore, if they have kids, they're gonna have to parent for 18 years, and we can't blow up a family just because people aren't together anymore. And so we do try to preserve relationships. Obviously, sometimes you can't do that. And if you have a divorce without kids, sometimes it can get really ugly if it's about financial things. But we at least try to start collaborative and get more aggressive if we need to.
Okay, that makes sense. So I want to get a little, do you mind if we get into legitimation just a little bit?
Sure.
Because it's interesting to me.
Yeah.
So what is involved in the legitimation process?
Yeah, so every family law process has a similar pattern to it. And so whether you're talking about legitimation or anything else, the first thing that you're going to do is file a petition. And for legitimation, it's usually a petition for legitimation, but then also for visitation and custody all at the same time. And so the father is the one who has to file for legitimation. He files that, and then the mom has 30 days to file an answer. And then it goes through sort of the whole process that a family law case would go to, including mediation and a final trial if it's necessary.
And the whole works. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is not included in family law? I guess some things are
Sure.
not included that you would think of.
Yeah, so family law in Georgia, and be aware that every state is very different. So if you come from a different state, it can be a little bit different than this. But in Georgia, family law is handled in Superior Court, which is sort of the main court. It does not include things like juvenile law, which happens in juvenile court. It doesn't include probate law, so probating a will or doing a guardianship. Those happen in probate court. And then usually attorneys who do adoption focus on adoption, and they don't do a lot of the family law. But know that all of those issues overlap, and so some attorneys will do guardianships that happen in probate court along with their family cases. Some will do adoption. So there's a lot of overlap there, but a lot of times when we think of family law, we just mean custody, child support, divorce, legitimation, and that kind of thing.
Okay. So why would someone want an attorney who just specializes in family law in your areas?
Yeah, it's a very specialized area of law because the laws are elaborate and specific, and especially when you get into high assets or when you get into complicated custody issues that might involve children with special needs or things like that. The laws are really complicated, and so at least at my firm, we believe that the people who do family law all of the time instead of dabbling in a lot of different things become experts in that area and are able to really address those needs and have seen a lot of different kinds of cases, and so aren't surprised by things when they pop up. Obviously, an uncontested divorce or something simple like that is, a lot of attorneys will do simple things, but if you're looking at a more complicated case, then an attorney who does family law most or all of the time is usually better.
Okay, that makes sense. I can kind of understand it. And I know a little bit about the trappings. So, I mean, I'm in real estate, so.
Yeah, and you don't want me to do a real estate case for the same reason.
Yeah, right. It's complicated too, but in a completely different way. ours is very archaic.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a lot of leftover stuff from old English common law and real estate.
But basically, you wouldn't hire an electrician to do your plumbing. So it's, you kind of
that makes sense.
hire the right attorney for the case.
I get that. Okay, so we're up towards the end of this segment. JoAnna, why don't you give them some contact information for you?
Sure. So our website is Georgia FLP. So Georgia spelled out, F as in family, L as in law, and P as in project.com. And our phone number is 404-480-2701. And we're all over social media, too. You can just search for us, Georgia Family Law Project.
Excellent. You're listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis. I am your host this week and every week, and this show is designed to just bring you legal information. If you have a serious legal issue, you need to go ahead and contract with an attorney. You can always call me at jameslewislegal.com at 404-610-0075. You can email me. You can contact me on my website. The last page of my website is a contact page. Just drop me a line. If I can't help you with your legal issue, I can direct you towards an attorney who can help you with your legal issue. If you have a topic you'd like to hear on this show, go ahead and contact me at jameslewislegal.com or drop me a line on my contact page, and I will try and bring on an attorney who knows something about your topic, and we'll get into the issue on air. We've got a lot of stuff coming up with you, so we'll be back with you in just a minute. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and today we are talking about how the law affects the family. I'm here in the studio with attorney JoAnna Smith. She's a founding partner of the Georgia Family Law Project. And right now we're going to talk about the steps in a case, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what are the steps in a case?
Sure. So every family law case follows a similar pattern. The first thing that somebody has to do is figure out what to file. And so they need to determine what kind of case they have. For example, if you're filing a divorce, you are going to file a petition for divorce versus a petition for legitimation.
Hey, that makes sense somehow.
Absolutely. One of the things about a divorce, though, is that you can file either an uncontested petition or you can file a contested petition. Uncontested means that the parties have agreed on everything.
And that's much easier.
It's much easier. You actually file it with the settlement agreement and everything, and the judge, you just wait 31 days, the judge signs off on it in 31 days, and you're divorced. Whereas a contested divorce, you file the petition, and then the process moves on.
And then it gets
there.
ugly?
Yeah. Well,
and then the baby mama drama comes in?
Not necessarily. It can still be a collaborative process. It just means you haven't agreed on everything when you file. There's some additional things you have to file along with your petition. There's some case filing forms. If it's a custody case, you may need to file a child support worksheet, different things like that. Most courts have the documents online, and so if people are doing it themselves, they can go to the court website and actually download the documents, but you want to make sure you have the right documents that you're filling out so you're not filing the wrong thing.
Okay, so where do they go to file? I mean, what if the different parties live in different areas?
Absolutely. So generally, you're going to file a case in the county where the respondent lives, and so the respondent is the same as a defendant. So the person who's not filing the case, the one who's receiving the documents, you're going to file in their county. If that person lives out of state, you may be able to file in your county, but you should probably talk to an attorney at that point to just make sure that you don't need to file it in the other party's state.
Okay. That I kind of get that. I mean, just where the party lives. It's as easy as that.
If you're filing a contempt action, which is saying that somebody hasn't followed what an original order said, so like if you have a divorce decree by the judge and somebody hasn't done that, you usually do the contempt in the county where the original divorce decree was finalized, where the divorce was finalized. But again, it kind of depends. Generally, you're going to file where the other party lives.
Okay, so I noticed on your website that you do mediation. Where does mediation come into play on this?
Absolutely. So once a party files, do you mind if we go back a couple steps? No.
Let's go back a couple steps.
So once a party files a case, then they have to get the other party served. And service doesn't mean just handing someone documents. It doesn't mean emailing it to them or texting it to them. They actually either have to have a sheriff or a process server serve the documents on the other party. Most counties will arrange that for people through the sheriff, but the clock doesn't start on your case until somebody's served. And then the other party has 30 days to file an answer.
Okay. So is it better to have a sheriff or a process server serve?
Yeah. So a sheriff will do it. It's usually a little bit cheaper to just have the sheriff do it. If you're afraid that somebody's going to try to evade service or, hide from the sheriff or something like that, you might want a private process server to do it. They usually are in plain clothes. Their cars are unmarked. They can show up at an office. They can show up at night when they know somebody's going to be home. And it's also can be a little bit nicer than having some, police officers show up in uniform at someone's house or job. Yeah. And so if you're trying to keep things low key, it may be better to use a private process server.
Okay. Okay, go on. We're still talking through the process.
Yep.
I want to get into mediation.
Yeah. So once the other party has filed an answer, in Georgia, most counties require mediation. Okay. So once an answer has been filed, a court before they have any other sort of hearings or something like that, will require the parties to go to a mediation.
Okay.
Mediation is really cool.
Yeah, I want to hear about mediation. What is mediation? What's involved in it?
Yeah, so mediation is when a neutral party, they don't represent the petitioner, they don't represent the respondent, they're neutral, gets the parties together either in the same room or at least in the same building and goes between the rooms and helps them hash out an agreement. The mediator can't tell the parties what to do. They're not a judge. But they can tell the parties what they think a judge might do. They can help them come up with creative solutions and try to settle the case so that the parties don't have to go in front of a stranger, the judge, who will decide their life for them.
Isn't the mediator a stranger?
Yes, but the mediator's not making decisions
they're
for
nicer.
them.
Okay.
Well, but it essentially allows the parties to make their own decisions, which can be helpful. If you have a strange work schedule, for example, and so an every other weekend visitation plan isn't going to work for you, a judge doesn't care about that. A judge may just order the every other weekend because it's easier, whereas you can, tailor a parenting plan to you and your family, that allows you to have Thursdays instead of Saturdays, if that's what works for you. And you can do that at mediation.
Now, you are a mediator, right?
I am. Okay. So sometimes we say, what could possibly be the best outcome if you go in front of a judge? And if you're getting a much better deal here, we might reality check someone and say, look, this is going to be better than what you would get at court. It might be in your best interest to take this. But again, as a mediator, I can't tell someone to take it. I can't do anything like that. But I can say, what would make this more palatable to you? Do we need to, counter offer with something like that? Do we, do you want something in return? What can we do so that you don't go to court and, get a bad out? Nobody's happy when they go to court. Everybody ends up unhappy.
Yeah,
whereas
everybody loses except for the attorneys.
Yeah. Whereas at mediation, everyone leaves with something. They might not be 100% happy, but everybody leaves with something rather than just being completely mad.
Okay, so mediation has failed. The parties are not getting along. They can't agree to anything. You've tried your best. What happens next?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things that could happen next. A temporary hearing is possible. So if the case is not ready to go to a final decision, but maybe the parties are still living in the house together, and that's just not working. And so as the case continues, they need to know who gets to live in the house while the case is pending. So you might go to a temporary hearing and have the judge just decide that issue on a temporary basis.
Okay.
Or maybe you need some temporary child support, as the case is going on.
Because it can get rough with no money.
Yeah, if the case is going to be 2 years, which they're generally not, but they can be, you might want some temporary child support in that process.
So how long do these cases normally last then? You said 2 years, they don't, but 2 years is kind of standard for a lot of litigation.
So family law happens a little bit faster. Obviously, if it's an uncontested divorce or something like that, it just takes 31 days. So it's very fast.
Yeah.
Most of our cases, maybe 6 months to
that actually is pretty fast for litigation.
It's because most cases settle. If something's going to go to a trial, then it could be. I had one that was going on it was a custody case. It went on for 7 years. I wasn't in it for 7 years, but it had, had been going on for a long time. Another thing that could happen during the pendency of the case is called discovery, where you might need to ask for some documents from the other party. And so you can ask questions, ask for documents, things like that. And you would want that to happen before a final hearing, obviously. And that discovery process has to happen within 6 months of the date that the answer was due.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. So what happens next? You've gone through mediation, discovery. Where are you in the process now?
So if you've gone through discovery and mediation and maybe even a temporary hearing and you've tried to settle it, but you can't, then you're going to go to a final hearing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now that sounds rough.
It can be. If you've been able to narrow the issues at all, then it might not be very long. But if you have a divorce that includes child support and custody and all of that, it can
houses, property, alimony.
Yeah, all of those things, then it can be rough. It's generally not like what you see on Law and Order, though. There's usually not a jury for family cases. It's usually just with a judge. But if it's getting that far, you may want an attorney at that point to help out.
They could probably sell tickets to some of the family law trials if there was juries.
Well, yeah, and so juries can't decide custody issues, but they can decide who gets the house, what kind of alimony and child support. And so there are some jury trials for family.
Okay, so there is. I was actually just joking about
that. No,
Okay.
Georgia does allow jury trials for financial issues and division of assets and debts in Georgia. Yeah.
Okay, so we're up against the end of this segment. So when we get back, we're going to talk about how the court makes its decision. JoAnna, give them some contact information for you once again.
Sure. The best way to get in touch with us is through our website at georgiaflp.com or by giving us a call at 404-480-2701.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. This show is designed to be your first step in a legal process. It's not designed to give you legal advice. We only give you legal information. What we try and do is guide you in your process. You can find out what type of attorney you're looking for, what kind of issues are at play, where you want to go, maybe how you want to file. This show may help you decide if you want to handle a case yourself or if you decide, whoa, there are a lot of things I hadn't thought about and I need some help. Whatever it is, we're here to help you. If you have a topic that you'd like to hear us discuss, go ahead and drop me a line. Hit me on my contact page on jameslewislegal.com. Go to the last page and just drop me a line. You can email me at james@jameslewislegal. You can also give me a call at 404-610-0075. Once again, that's 404-610-0075. All my old shows are archived on my website. You can go to the podcast page, and each and every single one of my old shows are archived on my website. A lot of my shows are also on my video blog page, so you can go there for reference, and pretty soon every single legal issue you can possibly imagine will one day be archived on my webpage. So go to jameslewislegal.com if you have any questions. We'll be back in a minute. The music is so dramatic today. So dramatic. I was really hoping for some baby mama drama in here to kind of feel out this music, but, we do what we can do. You're listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I am your host this week and every week for 48 minutes or so, where we talk about issues in the law. We are here to empower you, the listener. That's right. This show's all about empowering you, the person, with legal information. I am here today with attorney JoAnna Smith, and you are the founding partner of the Georgia Family Law Project. And we are talking about the law and how it affects the family. And when we last left off, we were talking about the court process. Mm-hmm. And so how does a court make a determination on these issues?
Right. So if you get all the way to a final hearing,
the final hearing,
and a judge has to make the decision for you, the judge has to follow the law, mm-hmm. and will determine things.
They can't just make up their own rules in the courtroom?
Some of family law is based on equity and what is in the best interest of the child and all of that, and that can get
so when you're saying
a little wishy-washy.
Okay, you use a legal term there. When you say because there's a lot of non-legal people out there listening. So when you're saying equity, what are you talking about?
Yeah, what the judge thinks is fair. Okay. So if there isn't a law that says a judge has to do a particular thing, a judge can look at all of the circumstances and say, I think this is what needs to happen because it's what's fair.
Okay.
And so if we're looking at something like the financial issues in a divorce case, one of those financial issues might be alimony, or what some people call spousal support. I think traditionally we see it as money that a husband has to pay to the wife, but it's gender neutral. It's known as spousal support in Georgia, and so either party can pay it to the other. A judge
now, is that common for the wife to pay spousal support? Does it depend just basically on the income one spouse makes?
So there in Georgia, some states have a literal equation of how long have the parties been married, how much does each party make, and to determine how much alimony and for how long. In Georgia, it's literally just based on one party's ability to pay and the other party's need. There is not an equation, and so it gets really wishy-washy. But
that sounds very wishy-washy. It's just based on ability to pay.
Yeah, and the need of the other party. So you can imagine that if the parties have only been married for a couple of years, they both have worked throughout that couple of years, there's probably not going to be any alimony awarded there because there wouldn't be a need for it. Whereas you can see if somebody has been the primary parent for 20 years and were out of the workforce that whole time, and the other party is making $100,000 a year, and the other and the parent wasn't making anything that whole time, that you might need some alimony in that case in order to help that parent establish themselves, get a job, an apartment, maybe go back to school. And so alimony might be appropriate there. So it's really based on a totality of the circumstances and how the ability of one party to pay and the other one.
Okay, so what about when one party's income fluctuates? Say one party has a steady job in real estate and the other party has started a struggling new law practice, but goes up and down. And the divorce happens during a down cycle.
Yeah, so that happens fairly frequently.
Colette, this is a warning. Don't divorce me yet. I'm just kidding. She's really good natured, so she listens to all these shows.
Yeah. So that's when the evidentiary hearing happens. That's when a judge is going to have to hear all of the evidence. Has it fluctuated in the past? What was the average of that? Can something step down over time? So start with a bigger alimony payment and have it kind of step down over time. There's different ways of dealing with it, but it's really going to be based on either what the parties can negotiate or what a judge decides is fair.
Okay, so the judge just decides what is fair.
Yes.
So that sounds really scary.
That's why mediation is usually better, so you get to decide
get those details solved.
Unlike alimony, though, something like child support is very equation driven. There's a child support worksheet here in Georgia. You literally put the gross income of both parties in there. It tells you what percentage of a specific child support number each party should be responsible for, and you add in the child care costs and the health insurance costs, and if there's any sort of extraordinary expenses, and it spits out a number.
Oh, that is awesome. Now, why isn't alimony like that? That sounds so much more equitable.
Yeah, so in some states, there is an equation for alimony. It's just Georgia has moved away from that.
Okay.
Yeah. Child support can differ from that from what that number is. If, for example, somebody makes a lot of money, the child support worksheet only goes up to a certain amount, and so you may need to adjust for very high income or very low income. If a child has special needs and so has really high expenses, those may need to be taken into account. Travel baseball is really expensive.
Travel baseball,
so,
yeah. Got it.
So you can deviate from that, or if the parties share equal parenting time, they may want to deviate from that child support. If they make sort of similar incomes, it doesn't make sense for one to be paying child support to the other if they're doing exactly the same amount of parenting time.
Okay. Now, is there a reason Georgia has deviated alimony away from that type of style? Is there a reason behind that, or it's just whim?
It's just how the case law has moved, and how the legislature has decided to handle it.
Okay, so there's no rhyme or reason. Okay, so how about visitation and custody?
Sure. So Georgia uses, and most states use, a best interest of the child standard.
Now, that sounds really complicated.
It can be complicated. There are, I think, 13 factors that the judge has to consider, can consider. And those range from, the educational and medical needs of the child to how much they've bonded with one parent or the other, who's been the traditional caretaker, a whole bunch of different things. But the determination is then again, to add up all of those and say what is in this child's best interest. You can imagine that just like with alimony, if your family not every family is the same. And so if you can work out a plan that works better for your family, that's going to be a lot better than having a stranger, a judge, decide what's in the best interest of your child. But obviously, if there are drug and alcohol issues or violence issues, the judge is going to take those into consideration too. And that's when trials get messy, like what you said, is when there's, sort of auxiliary issues that may lead to problems in developing a parenting and custody plan.
Do the child's considerations or wishes come into play here?
Yeah. So they're in Georgia, and it varies from state to state. There is an election that a child can do. Once they are 11 years old, the judge can take that into consideration, but doesn't have to. Once a child is 14, if they do an affidavit of election, a judge has to take that into consideration unless there's something that's truly not in the child's best interest about living with that particular parent.
Yeah, I like my dad because he parties a lot.
Yeah, so that
he lets me smoke weed in the basement.
Yeah. And the party should know there's two kinds of custody. There's legal custody, which is about who gets to make decisions about the child, who gets to see medical records and educational records. And most parties have joint legal custody. And then there's physical custody about where the child is when. And usually the battle is over where that child is when, and who's the primary parent, and who has parenting time when. And it's that physical custody that a child gets to make an election over.
Okay. Now that seems like that could be a really rough spot to put a child in. I mean, he loves both parents, or, maybe he just likes one parent but doesn't want to hurt their feelings. I mean, how does that happen in real life?
Yeah. Sometimes a judge will appoint someone called a guardian ad litem. And I actually work as a guardian ad litem too. They don't represent either party. They represent the court and do an investigation for the court about what is in the child's best interest. So they're looking at what's in the child's best interest rather than either of the party's interests. And that can be very helpful, especially in these cases where it's contentious. You don't want to put a child in the middle of that, and so you have somebody who can represent the interests of the child.
Okay, so the guardian ad litem thing, that sounds really interesting. So, and you do this. So
Yes.
What type of things do you would look for? What do you do?
Yeah, so you visit both, you visit the child at both homes. You go to the child's school, you talk to the kid, you get to talk to doctors and teachers and see the communications between the parties. You can do all sorts of different things to determine, what a child's needs are and who's best able to provide those needs. And sometimes you come up with a parenting plan that's, 50-50 because both parents are great. Sometimes that's not the case.
Okay, so you do a little bit of investigation here.
Yes. Yeah.
How intensive is that?
It's very intensive. It can be expensive for the parties too because it's an added expense. You're paying your own attorney,
so the parties pay
the guardian ad litem.
Okay. And the court appoints the guardian ad litem?
Yeah. So if the two parties agree on who it should be, they can pick a guardian ad litem, but the judge has to appoint that person because you're a representative of the court, not of either of those parties.
Yeah. Okay, I get it. When we come back, we're going to talk about assets and how we divide them. We're also going to give a little bit of a wrap up and talk about some other things that the populations should be, or different populations should be aware of during this proceeding. So, JoAnna, one more time, give them some contact information for you.
Sure. Our website is Georgia, spelled out, georgiaflp.com, or people can give us a call at 404-480-2701.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis. I am your host this week and every week, at least as far as I know. You can always contact me at 404-610-0075. You can email me at james@jameslewislegal.com. You can go to my website, jameslewislegal.com, and all my old shows are archived on my website. You can go to my video blog page, and a lot of them are there. All of them are on my podcast page. If you have a show topic that you'd like to hear about, go ahead and drop me a line on my contact page or by my email, and I'll bring on an attorney who actually knows something about your topic and can speak about your topic. We'll be right back after these messages. You're listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I am here with yet another great topic for you and another great guest. I have attorney JoAnna Smith on with me. She's a founding partner of the Georgia Family Law Project, and we are talking about how the law affects the parties or the family. So before we get into assets and debts and division and different other legal issues, why don't we just do a little bit of rundown? This is a dense topic. We throw out a lot of information, so just give them a little bit of rundown of what family law is.
Sure. So to remind everybody, we're talking about divorce, we're talking about custody, child support, visitation, legitimation, and kind of the issues that go around those. And what people need to do when they want to do a family case is first see if it's going to be uncontested, if they can agree to all of the issues before they file something. They got to figure out what to file. Usually it's going to be a petition for whatever they're asking for. And then move through that family law process of, waiting for the other party to give an answer, maybe going to mediation or a temporary hearing, trying to settle as much as possible. And if not, doing something like discovery and then going to a final trial. And at that final trial, having to work through all of the issues that they're asking for, which could include, alimony, child support, visitation and custody.
All that stuff.
All of that stuff.
Now, assets and debts. How does the court go about dividing up the assets and debts? I guess they just split everything in half?
So a lot of people think of California, where it's a community property state, where the courts literally divide things in half. In Georgia, it's equitable division of marital assets and debts. And so it's important to know what counts as marital.
Okay, first let's go through a little definition of terms. Now, you said community property state and then equitable division, so it's a different type of state. Let's define these things.
Yeah, so it's different where the judge is going to figure out what's fair, what's equitable. So, for example, if two parties have, if the parties have two cars, the cars might not be exactly the same value. Or have exactly the same debt on them, but it doesn't make sense to cut the cars in half, right, and give each of them one half of a car. It might be more equitable.
Now, is that what they do in the community property states?
No, but they would figure out exactly how much something is worth and divide that value exactly in half. Whereas in Georgia, it's just what is fair. It's fair for each party to have a car so that they can get to work, and so they might just divide that rather than figuring out exactly what's 50-50 of each value, right?
Okay.
And that can be done, that would be the same for any of the assets and debts. And so to figure out what that division is going to look like, you have to know what's marital and what's not marital. A marital asset or debt is anything that was earned or accumulated during the marriage. So that doesn't mean, if you had a bank account that you had from college and you haven't touched it at all during the marriage, that's going to be premarital. That's going to not be part of the marital assets. Similarly, if you inherited something, even if it was during the marriage, that's not marital. But if you earned money during the marriage and you put it in a bank account, even if that bank account doesn't have your spouse's name on it, that's marital because it came into the marriage as part of.
Wow, and a lot of assets are accumulated during marriages. People tend to become more stable. Am I correct that people become more stable and start to accumulate more assets when they're married?
They accumulate more assets. They also accumulate a lot more debt, right? There's some parties who they might rack up a lot of credit card debt. And if your wife, for example, is racking up credit card debt that you don't know about, if it happened during the marriage, it's still marital. And it still has to be.
So it's my debt.
it's your debt. But so that's why you have to then make the argument to the judge, even though this is marital, we're not going to just divide it 50-50. If you didn't know something was happening, you may be able to make the argument that it's fair for your wife to take that debt. you guys are never going to get divorced. It'll be fine. But
no, we're not even close. Colette, I love you. We're just talking about ifs, possibilities, and trying to give people some information.
But the judge would have to determine what's fair to just to divide something. It might not be exactly 50% of that debt. It might be how to separate that out.
Okay. So are there other issues that different populations might need to be aware of in this?
Yeah. So we talked earlier about unmarried parents, for example. Legitimation is something that
unmarried parents, that's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues there. And it's especially difficult because a lot of times parents haven't had a long-term relationship, and maybe they became parents accidentally.
Oh, this is the baby mama drama. All right, we finally got into it.
Yeah. And so things can get really contentious there. And so just making sure people know what their rights are. Custodial parents can use child support services for child support without having to go through this whole big process. Unmarried fathers need to legitimate their child. Even if everything's going great with their relationship, that's a great time to legitimate, is when everybody's in agreement, rather than waiting till things are contentious. So we do encourage people to take care of that early on.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. The other group of people that are in the news a lot are immigrants, especially those who are undocumented. We have a lot of people who worry about pursuing a case if they're undocumented because they don't want to have any court involvement at all, which we totally understand. Generally, family law is off limits to ICE or anything like that. And so I've not seen anybody involved in a family law case that have had immigration problems from that way. So I do want to let people know that, especially if they're facing domestic violence or something like that, it's a safe space. People need to take care of their family law issues. They also should know if your status is dependent on your spouse's status, you should really talk to an immigration attorney before the divorce.
That sounds like that could get very complicated, especially in this climate that we're in right now.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that you're talking to other kinds of attorneys that you need to before you just go along with your family case, or talk to a family law attorney who deals a lot with immigration as well. People with disabilities or people who have children with disabilities, you want to make sure that you're not impacting your benefits by doing something with the assets and debts. You may need to set up a trust, for example, if you're going to get a bunch of money, or you need to make sure that you're not getting too much alimony that makes it look like your income is too high and would mess with your benefits if you have disabilities or something like that.
That's interesting. So that would affect your disability benefits?
It's possible that it would. So you want to either, again, work with a family law attorney that is aware of what that impact would be, or consult another attorney that deals specifically with benefits. Especially for children, you may have provisions that, if one parent passes, then they're going to get life insurance or something like that. And so you need to make sure that you have trusts and things set up that are appropriate so that the child doesn't lose their benefits, especially their health benefits if they need that.
Okay. So the family is really changing dramatically in this day and age. And, you see a lot of same-sex couples adopting kids. Are there issues that might affect them independent?
Yeah. So LGBT families, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender families, are now able to marry just like anybody else in Georgia and anywhere in the country now. And so we're seeing a lot more people getting married and also getting divorced. And we're seeing a lot more.
Wait a minute, does that impact, does the fact that they're a same-sex couple, does that impact divorce?
So where it comes into play, especially, is if there are children involved and those children came from either a previous relationship or came into this relationship prior to people getting married. The law is not secure on whether getting married then legitimates those children between a same-sex couple. And so you may still need to do an adoption even if you intended for that child to be the non-biological parent's child.
Wait a minute. Doesn't that follow the same with opposite sex couples?
Yeah.
Also?
So if they get married, eventually their child immediately becomes legitimated.
Oh, wait a minute. So if it's a same-sex couple or if it's a different sex couple, if they get married, the child is legitimated automatically?
Yes.
But that's not true with the same-sex couple.
We are not sure that that's true with a same-sex couple, and so
we're not sure
because the law just hasn't developed yet, and so you need to be aware of that and seek out legal counsel if you're not sure what the status of your children are.
Okay. Is adoption affected by this?
Adoption
in same-sex couples?
Yeah, so adoptions are going through just fine. And so we are saying, just like how a step-parent would need to adopt their child if they wanted that child to be legally theirs, we're still suggesting that same-sex couple, the non-biological parent, do a second-parent adoption until the law is a little bit more solidified.
Now, are there any issues if the same-sex couple, because they're adopting kids also, are there any issues there? Like if they split up afterwards, does the split up just happen in the same way?
Yeah, as long as the children are legally each of the parents, then the divorce happens exactly the same, custody happens exactly the same. It's just making sure to establish those parental rights before anything bad happens.
Okay, that is good advice. We are at the end of our show, and it's kind of fascinating, especially when we talk about how the law is changing in certain areas, especially with same-sex couples. It's kind of fascinating that some of it is undeveloped at this point. Yeah. But JoAnna, why don't you give them some contact information for you here at the end?
We're the Georgia Family Law Project. You can Google us, but we're also at georgiaflp.com, and people can give us a call at 404-480-2701.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and this has been an awesome show. Thank you, JoAnna, for being on with me. And I want to thank our fabulous videographer here today, who's not normally here, Jonathan Bryant. He's actually the station program manager or program director. I forget the title, but anyways, he's a big boss, and he's taken the time to video us. And, of course, we've got the siren of sound, Sam Davis, over there, making sure the production and all the magic happens. Next week, I've got another great show for you. We're going to talk Social Security, disability, and issues that affect elder populations here in Georgia. You're listening to Lewis on the Law. See you guys next week.